Thank you very much for coming and joining us for this conversation, Lucy.
Thanks for inviting me as an airport.
Lucy, we often look at travel retail with the lens of European or Asian perspective. And of course, key markets there are, but in the Pacific region, airports like Auckland are bringing a different perspective in passenger profile, in terms of flows, in terms of retailing. So my first question to you, Lucy, how would you describe today the key dynamics shaping the travel retail in your part of the world?
I think there's probably two ways to answer this. One is, whilst we might be different in scale and in a different part of the region, there are some really consistent themes for us as an airport. So I thought it might be useful, since we don't often get invited to talk about the airport in perspective, that the dynamics that drive an airport and what we worry about. Number one is we take a very long-term view. So regardless of what's happening in a region or a dynamic or a trend, airports traditionally have a very long-term view, which can be quite distinct from retailers or brands. So a brand is often very interested in a new product or this season, and a retailer is very interested in this month and this year versus last year. We also care about that as an airport, but we're also thinking about the next 3 years, the next 5 years, and in my context, my team have to worry about the next 30 years.
Okay.
So the time horizon for an airport and what we worry about in terms of growth and sales can be today when we're talking to an operator and a brand, but is also, what are we doing 3 to 5 to 10 years out? So that means we have a very long lens on key things, which is why sometimes you see us talking to brands and operators, we've got slightly different language around timelines. Having said that, we also have a dynamic that remains true no matter what we are in terms of trend or season or where we are in the region, and that is we have to make the best use of our infrastructure. So coming here and seeing all the brands and all the operators and the new products and the variation, as an airport, what we're going is this the best use of the asset that we have been, basically we're guardians of, and we have to deliver growth and return for various stakeholders. So that's something that is perennial, doesn't go away. And then on top of that, we have a dynamic which is no different to Changi, no different to Dubai and Auckland. Yes, we're a little bit smaller, just a little bit. But we are the national airport. We stand, no matter what is going on, we have to represent the country. So whatever we're processing, we are often obliged by our customers who are local to go, is this the best version of Auckland or New Zealand that you can put into an airport? Because it represents a whole country. So we carry that obligation just as much as Changi, who does a very good job, and other really big scale airports. If I flip to what that means is we have a bit of a civic duty to make sure we have the best brands, the right mix, the right food and beverage, the right retail. So that's something that we're constantly having to balance. And if I answer the second part of your question, which is what's happening in the region that's specific and quite different to the EU and maybe Asia, the high street. So we're quite a young country. Australia and New Zealand were, many of you, if I give you a history lesson, about 200 years ago, some people decided to colonise New Zealand and Australia. And so what people did 200 years ago is they found somewhere better to live. So if I can be a little bit non-diplomatic, convicts were sent to Australia, but people chose to live in New Zealand for a better life. So a lot of what we're dealing with in our airport retailing dynamic is people are looking for a better life. So the way New Zealanders work, the way they behave, the way they shop, the expectation of travel retail is actually an extension of high street. So we are really trying to live in that balance of where travel retail is relevant and how does it compete with the high street. Not a new theme for anyone at this conference or anyone in this industry for the last few years, but for us it's hyper real because travel is such it's a right. We live on an island. 95% of all New Zealanders have a passport. So we travel. and we see the world, and therefore we think, if I can see it in the high street or if I can see it overseas, why isn't it at Auckland Airport? I think we all know the answer to some of those questions. And so, yeah, our biggest challenge is trying to be relevant for that 40 minutes. The dynamic is not different to EU and Asia. We have a similar kind of dwell time, and we're trying to make ourselves super relevant with a very competitive high street, which is what the customer is continuing to think of when they're at my airport.
What is striking is this long-term view that you were describing at the beginning. But in terms of passenger experience, what are the other specificities?
Okay. This is fascinating. I've got some Kiwis and Aussies here. The shopping culture for New Zealand and Australia is very different to Asia in particular. So whilst we're part of Asia Pacific, we are very different. Yes, shopping is an entertainment source, and we do a lot of it for leisure on the weekends and for fun. We're very big adopters of online, but it is not the same shopping culture as you would see, say, in Singapore or in other countries where there's a very high luxury focus. A lot of us don't use shopping as, we're not so internationally label driven. We're also very relaxed and informal as a culture. So we don't like aggressive sales. I went into an amazing store while I was in shopping on this lovely trip, and being sat down and offered a drink, and then every single version of this particular product came out, and it's an amazing and high quality experience. The sales culture in Asia is very competitive, and you really get looked after. It's not the same experience in New Zealand because New Zealanders typically don't like being sold. Okay. So we actually sometimes don't even like being approached in a store. We're like, no, I've got this. I'll work it out myself. So the sales culture is completely different, which can be hard for a brand to come into New Zealand and sometimes Australia and do something different because aggressive sales doesn't work for us.
It translates into the retail organization and experience?
Yeah. Okay. The discipline and hospitality shown in some of the EU and Asia markets, and to some degree it's more established in Australia. The culture of how you get sold something in New Zealand is very different around versus here.
In your role, Lucy, you are at the intersection between the brands, the retail, and also the passengers. So can you tell us what are the most difficult trade-offs you have to do today?
Yes. I think there's a combination of the balance between what we want as an airport, what the passenger wants, what the brand wants, and what the retailer wants. So it's the perennial conversation we have all the time, which I think is a nut we're all trying to crack. So the biggest trade-offs are for our airport exactly the same as what bigger airports would be worrying about. So how much global do I have versus local? How much do I deliver in terms of return and commercials versus the experience? For the context of Auckland, and I would possibly suggest Australia and New Zealand collectively, how do I achieve relevance when my customers want what they see overseas, but actually the brands may have other priorities or other regions to go into first? So we're more than aware when we come here that there is a hyper opportunity for many brands and retailers, and choosing to put their focus is that we're trying to work out how to make sure that they're trading off, hey, come to this part of the region. It's not as competitive, so there's some silver linings, and sometimes we're small and perfectly formed. So we're actually trying to get other people to trade off their opportunities by coming to ours. So it's not always what we have to trade off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm sure one of the things is common to all the airports in the world is about the conversion rate. Do you have a specific way to address this?
No, not really, because ultimately all airports, no matter which country you're in, we're looking for the people that come into a doorway and then get onto a plane. We are all trying to achieve the same thing in terms of conversion. However, what we do have is we don't have the same scale. So we have a very strong awareness of the people that you put into the system and then the ones that go. we have an obligation that we can't just rely on scale of volume. So, say for example, using maths, $1 per person when there's 100 million is quite compelling. But for us, $120 for the smaller percentage of people is super valuable. So we're very focused on dwell time, flow. We have to do some of the very traditional like shopping centre values of where you put people and how you get them to stay in a space in order to do conversion. The other part is the pre-travel awareness. So at the moment, our biggest conversion, I would say, gap is as an industry, but also as an airport and as operators on how are we educating our customers before they get to our airport. And my single biggest key issue is the concept of relevance. So essentially, if we don't make ourselves relevant, then why would someone give us 40 minutes or more? Doesn't matter how lovely my flow is, if they're walking past thinking it's not relevant to me. I don't know if you guys have done it, but when you explore into duty-free stores, we helped stock some shelves the other day. So my colleague and I were helping one of our duty-free operators with a new space. I work in duty-free, this is my industry, and I'm stocking shelves going, this product's amazing. And there is so much of it and so much variety, but you would need 4 hours with a staff member one-on-one to talk you through just what's in the store. So we've got this real dynamic of conversion is now about relevance and how do we get people to know more about what we've got in a meaningful way.
Okay. So I understand there is a less luxurious approach, but how price sensitive is the passenger in Auckland Airport?
Very.
Okay.
I think I've often said in our region, tax and duty free is in our name. If we were called something else, price and value is fundamentally attached to the legacy of tax and duty free. I absolutely understand as an industry we need to create value. As an airport, more than anyone, I would love to create value that isn't always attached to price. Having said that, New Zealanders, Australians, again, they've chosen to live somewhere that is not the same as Asia and Europe. They are looking for value for money. Our buying power is a little bit different, and our sales culture is different. So we want to feel smart. Whenever we do research as an airport and we share as much as we can with our retailers, the underlying emotive driver for a lot of our customers in my airport, they want to feel smart. They want to be rewarded. So if they make a decision to buy something in my airport, say over High Street or over another airport, they need to walk away feeling that it was special, exciting, and rewarding. And it's the rewarding part that I think as an industry we've really got to work on together, because otherwise the High Street feels more rewarding. And that's a challenge for us.
Smart purchasing then.
Yeah.
If we shift a little bit the perspective, going back to the global context, recent geopolitical tension, including the war in the Middle East, are affecting air routes and, of course, the international travel flows. How does this kind of disruption impact your region?
The immediate impact is more so on pricing for the airlines planning their capacity. So at the moment, we're working really closely with the airlines. We still have 26 airlines flying to 42 routes. That's just Auckland. What we can see is it's having an immediate recalibration on pricing and the capacity that the airlines are then trying to make sure they have. So there's a little bit of tweaking here and there. And ultimately, we are in a really strong position and we currently have no jet fuel supply issues. So that's something we keep a watching brief on. The benefit of being an airport asset, and this is similar to other countries, we are massive pieces of infrastructure. We are huge, critical enablers of cargo, not just passengers. So the benefit of being in this industry is we all move goods for our countries as an airport, and therefore we are seen as a critical asset. So most airports are seen as critical assets to enable the economy, regardless of passenger travel, for example. So planes need to come in to get goods in and out. For every international touchdown we have at Auckland Airport, there's $1.4 million of value brought to the economy for New Zealand. So it's a very valuable asset during a time of crisis, like the disruption we're seeing.
And how do you adapt in the retail business every day?
I would love to say, we're really nimble and agile. But I think I can share from an airport perspective, we're often at the coalface of brands and operators who, want to be able to get an answer on how they can fix something. I think as an industry, we can really struggle with real-time changes. A lot of times our stores, our ranges, our seasonal buying and our contracts don't always allow for agile. Is that something I think we need to work on? Yes. We all recently learned in the last 6 years how to be a lot more open and transparent around what partnership looks like when times can be interesting. And that is why I'm confident whatever's coming and whatever we're in now, we are in a far better position to be in a more partnership mindset. Noting that airports, brands and retailers often have competing interests, but we all want growth.
Good, good. Lucy, traditionally, airports are primarily infrastructures and transit hubs, but today's expectations are changing. So how do you see the role of the airports evolving?
I think I'll go back to the key theme which we've all been hearing in the last few days, and it's not new, but it is the nut we need to crack. So we've got to think about what does it look like if we don't rely on luxury. So luxury is great, by the way, it's amazing. But if there's a constant need for new and different and independent or up-and-coming brands, what does it mean for really established brands? That's one element. And the other one is the attention economy. So travel retail, if you imagine, your day-to-day life, the amount of time that you have traveling is quite different to the amount of time you have in your other normal life. So our job is to try and work out over the next 3 to 5 years how we can get more of your attention span and be part of the attention economy when you're not traveling, so that when you are, we've got this much more open window for you. And that's a challenge for the airport as well as the brand and the retailer. We're basically trying to get ourselves into people's everyday life and be extraordinary, not just on the day you turn up at the airport. That's a big challenge. Well, why not?
Because we see that a lot of airports are putting a lot of efforts in the experience the passenger have, also in the technology that is now available. How do you see this part?
I think I would delight everyone by not talking about the AI and the generational shift, because I think we've all heard so much about it and we're all grappling with it. I would argue that perhaps simplifying things for us, we should adopt things that are really smart, like food and beverage ordering. No one wants to stand in a queue. Thank goodness we all now have a much easier adoption of QR ordering for food and beverage. Nothing more frustrating than waiting to order a coffee behind someone else who's ordering a coffee. But our biggest challenge, I think, is also simplicity. So keeping things simple, technology, and being smart and adopting it, but then also not losing the ability to go. In the next 3 to 5 years, people want relevance, they want to feel smart, and they want to have a really good time when they're at the airport. How do we make that happen in the simplest of ways?
Thank you, Lucy. We are coming to the end of this conversation, but I would like to have a last question to you on perspective. How do you see, in fact, if you look ahead 3 to 5 years, what ideas or approaches from this region could influence globally the travel retail?
Okay. I think if I can sum it up, it'll be being part of the conversation in the social and digital space. And I don't just mean pumping out deals and talking about travel exclusives like here's our latest product. It's genuinely finding a place where travel retail is intersecting with high street retail. We've traditionally enjoyed a really neat bubble. It's a super, super precious gem that we have, which is travel is extraordinary and the shopping and retail engagement is extraordinary that goes with that. The high street has got extraordinary, if that's a phrase. They're really competitive. And I think the opportunity for us is to start going, how do we change some of our global playbooks a bit more? Maybe not always just the newest product or a new box that something might come in, which is very sought after and does very well. But how do we make sure that we are blurring our ability to go into the mindset before travel, so that when they turn up, they are more evolved as a customer?
Good. I was really struck by this long-term process that you had, which is 20 or 30 years, which is definitively not the time frame that we may hear usually. But our conversation made also clear that travel retail is multiple, it's plural. There is not only one way of seeing the things, and that some models and some ideas are also coming, may also come from this part of the world, which also has its own perspective, all ways of seeing the passenger and the airport models. So thank you very much, Lucy. And thank you to all of you to have assisted to this last C-Suite conversation. I thank you and I wish you a good flight back today to all of your destinations. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.